All right, we're ready to get started. Thank you all for being here so much. Thank you, thank you. Bus riders, workers, elected champions, everyday folks who believe in RIPTA and the promise of a public transportation system that serves all Rhode Islanders. My name is Liza Birkin. I'm the board president of the Providence Streets Coalition and an organizer of the Save RIPTA campaign. And I am dismayed, honestly, to have to be here today. This is not where I want to be, but these are the folks who I want to be with. You know, we heard back in February 2024, when RIPTA held a series of service cuts, how devastating it was going to be for everyday bus riders to get to work, to get to school. And now we're back again about a year and a half later. And the cuts before us, forced by a $10 million budget deficit, are going to affect 58 out of RIPTA's 63 routes, starting September 13th. If Governor McKee and our state leaders don't act. And we are here today to say there is still time to act, and we demand that they take action to find temporary funding so that RIPTA can avert these cuts. Make no mistake, if these cuts go through, workers will lose their jobs. Students will not get to class. Older adults will not be able to get to the doctor or get groceries. Immigrants and new refugees will not be able to join the economy and start a new life. More people will be forced to spend more of their scarce income on Ubers and Lyfts, be forced to walk or bike long distances on dangerous roads, or simply be trapped at home and not go to the places where they would go. This will only put an even larger strain on systems like unemployment, emergency medical services, food pantries, and our agencies that serve the unhoused. This will not make Rhode Island an attractive place to live for young professionals, and it will definitely not make Rhode Island an attractive place for large employers to come and set up shop. You're gonna hear from elected allies, from bus drivers, from bus riders today about the impacts. And what I hope more than anything else is that you all will go to the 12 upcoming service cut hearings that start today at noon in Warwick and will continue through the next week and a half to hear again from bus riders exactly how this is going to impact their lives. So first up, someone who understands the impacts almost more than anybody is Walter Melillo, the president of ATU Local 61 team. Thank you. Woo!
Thank you all. Like Eliza said, I'm the president, business agent, Local 618, 618A here in Providence, and represent all the hard men and women working here at RIPTA. So, you know, these service cuts, we all know where they're going to lead. They're going to eventually lead to job losses, which in return directly affects the quality of the service provided by our hard-working union members. Reduced service will result in overcrowded buses, safety, and health concerns for both riders and, again, our members. Furthermore, these changes will impact the community's access to essential transportation for everyday needs. While service cuts seem like a short-term solution for budget shortfalls, the long-term costs in terms of economic damage, social impact, and difficulty rebuilding service is far greater. Sustainable funding is crucial to maintaining and expanding the transit service. Over the past 2 years, the union and RIPTA have made strides in recruitment, workforce development, and in return, we had more training, mentorships, apprenticeships. This now is all put on hold. So remember, sorry about that. I lost my place. So, I ask you today to stand here and fight with us for the members in the community to keep the service we have and advocate for the funding. Please call your representatives, your senators, the mayors, the governor's office, and please attend these hearings, these RIPTA hearings for service cuts. We cannot allow people of Rhode Island to be left behind. Thank you.
I want to mention that as a condition of getting temporary funding in last year's budget, the General Assembly and the governor required RIPTA to execute an efficiency study, the 8th such efficiency study since 2002. And we knew, those of us who pay attention, those of us who ride the bus, those of us who work here, knew that there's not extra fat to trim from RIPTA. There is only service, there is only jobs. We knew this, we've known this for months, we've known this for years. They're not hiding anything. And this proposal before us is not right-sizing RIPTA. It is decimating our public transportation system. And the only people that are going to bear the brunt of this are the riders and the workers. So here to talk more about this is Senator Mark McKenney.
Thank you, Liza. Thank you, Nicole, for putting this together. I was happy to put in the bill this year to request full funding for the Save RIPTA on behalf of the Save RIPTA Coalition. I've heard the word devastating used. I'm not sure that word does justice to what we're talking about, what the impacts will be here. We're looking at folks who are going to lose their jobs, folks that are going to lose the ability to get to their jobs. We're busy here in Rhode Island trying to improve our education system. We're going to have folks who aren't be able to get to school to improve their education. This is going to cause great pain. And who's going to be on the receiving end of that pain? The most vulnerable folks in our state. I think back to a year or so ago when the last minute Citizens Bank needed some funding. We come up with that. We ought to be able to come up with funding here. We have budget difficulties, we always do. But in my view, we should be putting more money into public transit, not cutting it. I am tired of hearing RIPTA could be run better. The study just done is just confirming what I think was already known. Hey, there's no entity known to man that someone couldn't criticize the lack of efficiency or claim that could be run better. But the fact is, RIPTA is run pretty darn efficiently, similar to comparable agencies. It's no question here that these cuts are going to lead to not only these route cancellations and fare hikes and job losses, but that in turn is going to give rise to lower ridership and increased budgetary difficulties for RIPTA. There are other options. There are other sources. We can avoid these devastating cuts. Our state government should adequately fund public transit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. It's no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted commuting patterns, that venture capital-backed companies like Uber and Lyft have decimated public transit systems across the country, and that runaway inflation after the pandemic has raised the cost of everything, from labor, materials, everything. This is causing similar funding crises across the country for our public transit systems. This is not about RIPTA. This is not about how RIPTA is run. This is about a changing world and a changing financial structure, and about Rhode Island, again, being behind the curve. Some states, like in New York and Pennsylvania and Minnesota, and Massachusetts, have found sustainable long-term funding sources for their public agencies. Others, like Illinois, Pennsylvania, are still on the fence and facing the exact same kinds of cuts that we are. So it's up to Governor McKee and our state leaders to decide, which side do we want to be on? Do we want to be a forward-thinking state that is going to actually decarbonize our transportation, actually provide a system that young people, older folks, young families want to ride on? Or are we just going to let it die? We're on a path to letting it die. And one of our greatest champions and somebody who refuses to let that happen is Representative David Morales.
For months, we have been on the front lines, pulling on the cord to stop these budget deficits. to stop these service cuts. And now the bus is turning, but it's turning the wrong way. Because it is essential bus drivers that are being threatened with job losses. It is the working people in our communities that will be forced to suffer, as over 50 routes are on the verge of having their services reduced or completely cut altogether. And we're not just stripping away economic mobility for working people. We're also stripping away the basics of public joy. When I was reviewing the impact of the proposed service cuts to RIPTA, I was shocked to see that one of our more popular routes right here in Providence that takes you to Roger Williams Park would be discontinuing weekend services. And what that represents is a working family no longer being able to access a public good, a public resource for themselves and their loved ones. What that represents is a weekend staff member no longer being able to have access to reliable transportation to and from work. Our communities cannot afford to just settle for using rideshare operations like Uber and Lyft. Because I've had community members that have shared with me that if it wasn't for the bus route that takes them directly to Roger Williams Park, they'd be forced to get into a $15 Uber just to be able to access our natural resources. And so as we look further towards this issue, we have to recognize that there are solutions in front of us. But the question is whether there is political courage to adopt these solutions. Because any time there is discussion or rumors about a big corporation, whether it's Hasbro or Citizens Bank, threatening to leave our state leaders scramble almost immediately. They scramble to look for a subsidy package or policy solutions to ensure that these big businesses remain in our backyard. But when it comes to a public good, when it comes to the basic means of being able to transport someone from point A to point B, our state leaders are stalling. I'll be the first to say that I would be more than excited to return back to session for a special session to discuss different budget means as to how we can alleviate this $10 million deficit. But I also recognize that the solution to this crisis in front of us doesn't necessarily require legislative approval. The governor has the ability to step in, to intervene, and to say that public transit is a good that must be protected. Entonces estamos aquí porque sabemos que estamos en una posición muy difícil con un servicio tan importante para nuestra comunidad por RIPTA. Y yo creo que es la responsabilidad de nuestro gobierno para asegurar que este servicio siga para nuestras familias, para nuestros niños, para los que necesitan llegar al trabajo. Yo he hablado con muchos de mis vecinos y hemos mirado que si se van a mover con estos cortes de RIPTA, van a estar impactados porque ya no pueden llegar a su trabajo, al parque. Y es muy importante que notar que las soluciones están presentes y hay modos que el gobernador puede llegar a este momento y decir que vamos a proteger a RIPTA y los que usan este servicio. So I thank all the advocates, the bus riders, the drivers that make this advocacy possible. Because together we are saying that public transportation is not supplemental, it is essential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. I want to take a second to talk about the options. We've said there are options that the governor can take right now. And it's perfect timing because the State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, is under its revision process right now. So right now is the perfect time to flex some temporary funds into RIPTA's operating budget to make this change to avert these cuts. We are talking about $10 million here. The proposed cost for the Washington Bridge is upwards of $700 million at this moment. $10 million for the 40,000 bus riders every single day who need to get around. So option number one, When the governor refused to sign the state budget, citing that he was not happy with the increases in taxes and fees, in the Providence Journal, Budget Director Brian Daniels said that the administration had suggested to the House that $15 million for RIPTA come temporarily from a combination of surplus funds and gas tax revenue to be freed up by the end of debt service payments on a bond. If that was an option then, before the budget was signed, why is that not an option now? So that's number one. Please, members of the media, press the budget office and see about those temporary funds, which bond is at the end of debt service, and how we can make those temporary funds get to RIPTA. The second one is through flexible funds from the federal government, namely the carbon reduction program. This is a new source of formula funding from federal highway as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it's meant to go towards services that help decarbonize transportation. That is RIPTA. That is transit operations, and that funding can absolutely be flexed from its current place in the carbon reduction strategy to RIPTA transit. There's a couple, and then the third thing that is the most obvious that can be done right now is that Director Alviti, Board Chair Alviti, can decide to flex some state funds for RIDOT to RIPTA. So those are the options on the table, and that is what we are asking the governor and state leaders to consider today. So I want to introduce our next speaker, another one of our amazing Save RIPTA bill sponsors, Karen Alzate.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Representative Karen Alzate, represent Pawtucket and Central Falls. I had something written, but I think this comes better when it comes from the heart. So representing two cities right now, as I hope many of you have been able to enjoy our beautiful new stadium that we have fought so hard for, that the governor also made sure that this stadium was going to be something that was beautiful, and right here in my community, right here, right in Pawtucket, where we could get all of Rhode Island to make sure that they could come and enjoy something in one of the cities that I represent. The majority of the people that work at the stadium, they live in nearby communities and rely on RIPTA. But not only the people that work at the stadium, but the people that come and buy the tickets and buy the food and come and enjoy the games, they take RIPTA to the stadium and or close to it. We have a beautiful new train station that sits right between Pawtucket and Central Falls. It is a great way for people to come and watch a game. If we continue to not invest in RIPTA, what is going to happen to our stadium? It is an investment not only for the stadium, but for the people of Rhode Island. In Central Falls, 1 square mile, full of life and full of hardworking people, delicious restaurants. How do people get there? We have in-house District 60. I believe I have the most affordable housing being built in that area, and parking is a problem for us. Majority of our people who are going to be going into these brand new affordable housing are going to rely on RIPTA. If we cannot continue to provide what RIPTA needs in order to keep these buses running, I'm not sure what's going to happen to the economic mobility of our states. This is not just only about our workers, our bus drivers, and RIPTA. This is about economic mobility for our states. For the past 2 years, I've had the pleasure of advocating to make sure that we fund RIPTA correctly, because I see it firsthand with both communities. I have constituents, I have students who are able to use RIPTA to get to school. I myself in high school used RIPTA to get to school when my parents weren't able to give me a ride. So funding RIPTA is not only it's a problem for the whole state, actually. It's a problem for all constituencies, for everybody from, I hear it from my colleagues in Richmond, and I hear it from my colleagues in Woonsocket. In order for us to continue to have a thriving state, we need to continue to fund RIPTA. And I know the question on everybody's mind is, how do we do that? I have been fighting for legislation to increase taxes on the 1% in Rhode Island. It is time that they contribute to our beautiful state. It is not, we cannot allow them to continue to come into our state and say that they are investing. However, they're the ones who can pay for this. They're the ones who are going to continue to benefit if we have a thriving economy. So I ask that we continue to advocate for taxing the 1% in Rhode Island so that we can continue to make sure that our stadium gets people there, and also people who live in Central Falls are able to get to and from their house. Thank you.
Representative, thank you for bringing up the nexus between housing and transit. We are in a housing crisis. Everyone knows this. I encourage you all to Control F for transit within the new state housing plan. I believe RIPTA's in there like 25 times, and that affordable housing is being cited directly to where high frequency transit is supposed to be happening. And if that is cut and we are not building parking garages, what is going to happen? So here to remind us about the climate impacts of cutting transit service is Emily Koo, Senior Policy Advocate and Rhode Island Program Director of the Acadia Center, and her son Henry.
Hello everyone, my name is Emily Koo. I'm a policy advocate for the climate and energy nonprofit Acadia Center. I live on and most frequently ride the R line. I'm also a new mom. Today we're hearing about the harm these service cuts will cause Rhode Islanders that need to commute to their jobs, connect with their communities, and meet their basic needs. I'm here to remind our state leaders that a robust public transit system is necessary to reach our climate mandates and to mitigate the harm of the climate crisis for generations to come. I first started learning about and working on climate in 2010, and over the past 15 years, the consequences of burning fossil fuels have only intensified here in Rhode Island. Each summer brings more days of unsafe heat, intense rainstorms cause flash floods in our neighborhoods, streets and highways. Smoke from wildfires makes it unhealthy to spend time outside. Transportation makes up the greatest portion of emissions in our state. We don't need to wait for the 2025 climate strategy to wrap up to know that a robust public transit system is essential for a future where people can take fewer trips alone in their cars. The state's Transit Master Plan, 2022 Climate Update, and Long Range Transportation Plan all assert this. As a mom, I'm worried about the heat, flooding, and air quality that my son will face 15 years from now when he'll be about driving age, but maybe he'll take the bus instead, and 15 years beyond that when he may consider starting a family. If these cuts stand, it will only become harder to rebuild our beleaguered transit system and reduce emissions from the way we get around our state. I urge our leaders to fully fund RIPTA so that we have a safe, healthy, and livable climate for our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Next, we're going to hear from Valerie Ryshuk with the Rhode Island Transit Riders.
Hi, everybody. Amy Glidden is our chair, and she can't make it today. She says that over 40,000 riders will be impacted by these cuts. She wants the governor to please do the right thing by riders, by our businesses, fix our economy and our climate, and find some state funds to help Rhode Island keep moving forward. I have some comments for you today because I'm a rider. My bus is the 92, and I have no car, whatever. I own zero cars. I would like to talk to you about the rider experience. We are cool people. We are absolutely awesome people. Riders budget like a boss at the kitchen table. Riders know that if they can't afford 3 cars, they'll go down to 2. They'll check and see if somebody in the family can ride the bus. If they have 2 cars, they might go down to 1. If they have 1 car, like me, to go down to 0. They're going to see if public transit is that option that they're going to be able to rely upon. Riders are also cool because they're sitting on a bus with 39 other passengers, and they are reducing congestion on the roads and the highways, and they're contributing tremendously in that regard. We have spoken about the fact that riders have the smallest carbon footprints of anybody in our state, including my friends who have their bikes and they put them on the front rack of those buses. We have these tiny carbon footprints. And finally, riders contribute because they pay a fare when they get on the bus. And yet, riders are often stereotyped in this state as losers who ride the loser cruiser. And it's unfair and it's wrong. And we need to join together and we need to change that stereotype. We need to transform this. I feel riders have been impacted most by this constant cycle of wondering if the funding is going to come. How can you sit at your dining room table and set a budget for your family if you're not really sure that there's really going to be a RIPTA or there's going to be a bus for you? This cycle of not knowing and then having these hearings where we all have to go and say our sad story. And mine is that I wear a disability bracelet and I am a senior citizen, and we all have to go and tell that. And then of course, there's usually a rescue period where funding is found. That cycle needs to stop. That's not necessary. Let's fund transit. Period. Be done with it and not keep doing this. Thank you very much.
Woo! Thank you so much, Gal. All right, 2 more speakers for y'all. Next up, we're gonna bring somebody who has been the heart and soul of this agency for so many years. Give it up for Tommy Cute.
Good morning, my name's Tommy Cute. I was a bus operator for 45 years. I've recently retired. I'm here in support of my brothers and sisters in President Melillo and the ATU, which for 112 years has been providing Rhode Island citizens with transportation services, whether it was electric streetcars, buses, and now back to electric buses. This is a crisis that will affect many parts of the population. It's going to ripple across those who rely on bus service to get to work. In the fall, it will impact, if these cuts go through, the 4,000 students in Providence that commute on RIPTA vehicles to their high schools all around the city. It's also an economic impact to those citizens who will be restricted to the end of the line of the bus route. By that, what I mean is they'll only be able to go and search for work within the circle of the metro transit system that is now being proposed under Governor McKee. These proposed cuts are devastating. Almost every line is being cut except for, I believe, the 24L, which goes into Fall River. So Fall River is going to have better bus service than Pawtucket, which is losing all its town service. About 44% of the cuts are in Pawtucket. And Johnston also is going to be losing access to Hartford Avenue and to Centerdale through Manton Avenue and Hartford Avenue. Those 2 routes will end at the Providence City line. So what I'm asking for the governor to do is to put a pause on this, work with all the people in General Assembly who have worked so hard to try and sustain funding for RIPTA during this crisis. Put a pause on it. Let's build an off-ramp and look at giving RIPTA the opportunity to reevaluate the routes without impacting the riders and without layoffs to the employees at RIPTA. There are a lot of hard-working people across the street that I worked with for many years, and I would hate to see them lose their jobs, which their families depend on their incomes and the support that they get from the RIPTA corporation over here. Again, I want to thank everyone, the stakeholders, especially elected leaders that came today. They've been there in the forefront right from the beginning of this fight. And again, my president, Walter Melillo, he's been outstanding at getting the message out. And we look forward to working with the governor, work with the General Assembly, and find a solution to this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy, and for your years of service driving. All right, here to close us out today and to speak to the intersections of labor and the transit system is RIAFL-CIO President Patrick Crowley.
Thank you, Liza, and thank you to everyone who spoke before me. Let me be very clear. This service cut is a form of a tax increase on working class Rhode Islanders. It's the only way to see it, because by expecting working people, by expecting the people that rely on the RIPTA service to get to work, to get to the hospital, to get to the places they need to be, you're raising taxes on working class Rhode Islanders. by asking us to shoulder the burden through job cuts, by asking us to shoulder the burden through reduced services. You are raising taxes. You're just making a choice about how to do it and who bears the brunt. And quite frankly, Rhode Islanders are sick and tired of having working class people bear the brunt of budgetary shortfalls. But like you've heard, there's things that we could do. There's an opportunity before these cuts are put forward to save the day. And I'm asking all of our elected leaders, my colleagues that are here with us today, those who couldn't be here, we have time. Let's find those solutions. Let's forestall these changes now. As a board member, I'm willing to work with anyone, whether it's an elected official, anyone in the business community, about how we can make sure that RIPTA has the resources it needs. But let me just be very clear. The days of balancing the budget on working Rhode Islanders should be done. And we're going to fight to make sure that RIPTA has the services that it needs, it has the funding that it needs, and working class Rhode Islanders aren't left with the responsibility of doing things that everyone else should have been doing in the first place. Thank you.
Yeah, 1 second. All right, thank you all again so much for being here. I also want to thank Central Falls City Councilwoman Tatiana Baena, local 808 president and AFL-CIO Secretary Treasurer Karen Hazard, Climate Jobs Rhode Island, Economic Progress Institute, and every single bus rider, every single worker who makes this place run and who gets Rhode Islanders get to where they need to go. You've all seen we have a map, the Providence Streets Coalition has put together a map of the service cuts. You'll see this is essentially shrinking the service down to the Providence metro area and Aquidneck and like a little bit of Aquidneck Island. This is taking the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority and shrinking it to Providence County. This is cutting rural service for most of the western part of the state. This is reducing weekend service across the state. Governor McKee has outlined several worthy goals in the 2030 plan. Improving school attendance, raising household incomes, implementing the Act on Climate, and solving the housing crisis. How can any of this happen with RIPTA being decimated as it is proposed to be? These cuts are the largest proposed in RIPTA's history. We're here to ask Governor McKee, do you really want that stain on your leadership? Do you really want that? There is still time to act. Before September 13th, we call on everyone and anyone to work together to find, if not, to find at least some temporary $10 million to plug this hole.